Hi, Leigh-Anne. I'm so happy to have you on this channel. Thank you so much for saying yes to coming on here and having a chat with me. So for the audience, I just wanted to explain that, I've done a lot of videos, as you know, summarizing parenting books. I've also done a whole series on inner work. And I just wanted to bring something a bit different. And I started following Leigh-Anne a few months ago. And a lot of things that she shared I really resonate with. And I thought it would be so valuable to bring this interesting conversation to all of you guys. So Leigh-Anne, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about what you're doing, how you came into this work. And I know that you're a mom as well, so if you want to share that.
Oh, Anna, thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait for this conversation. And so, yeah, how did I get into this work? Well, I'm a psychologist, I'm a relationship coach, and also a breathwork teacher based in Los Angeles. And how I got into this work, this is a long story. I'm going to try to be concise with it. I was actually working in the field of advertising in my 20s, so completely different field, and went through kind of like this crisis in my late 20s of like, this is not what I want to do with my life. And, kind of had that moment where it's like, yeah, I don't think I can do that forever. It was really, really stressful, high burnout career. And so I just really took like a year to go in and discovered that I had always really been drawn to the field of psychology. And so I decided to just go back to school and study and all of that. And so it was largely due to the fact that my father growing up had mental health problems. And yeah, just it was very tough to grow up with him. He was very abusive. And I always wanted to understand why he turned out the way he did. And so that was kind of my personal story that took me to the field of psychology. And so I was practicing as a psychologist for about 7 years. And then my marriage actually started to crumble. And we just went through the fire together. He and I had been together about 15 years at that point. And we have a child together. Back then, he was about 4. And so it was a real crisis. And then at that point, going through 2 years of intensity with him, we decided to part ways at the end. We really kind of gave it our all, But anyway, at that point, when I sort of came up and out of that crisis and had done so much healing, so much of my own work around trauma and relational wounding, I decided to start to specialize in relationships. And this is because women actually started to come to me sort of knowing what I had just been through, knowing that I was a psychologist. And so I started to kind of specialize in this. And now it's 100% my passion. So I know that was a long answer, but that's what led me to my work.
No, that's great. And your passion really shines through in everything that you share. So I can really attest to that. And you're also a mom. So your son, how old is your son now?
So he's turning 14 in April. So very, very close. He'll be 14.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I thought it would be a great place to start with how parenting can be a great platform for inner work. I know that inner work is a big part of what you share, and it's also a big part of what I believe in and what I share. And there's actually a narrative that goes around on social media that says that you should heal before you have children. And this is actually something that bothers me because it's a lot more complex and nuanced than this. And often you don't know that you need to actually do any inner work until you have the children.
Right.
And I know that for me, it's actually been the case, right? And becoming a mom was basically self-development on steroids.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was hoping you could share based on your own experience or, based on the work that you do with your clients and what you think about all of that.
Oh my gosh, I love that you shared that. And it's so interesting because I think about, it's kind of the same thing that people say about getting into a relationship or dating or whatever, right?
Yeah,
You should be perfect before you get into your relationship, and it's just not possible. I mean, I think it's to some extent,
Yeah.
maybe there's sort of like a balanced middle way of like, sure, yeah, it might be good to just, get to know yourself and do whatever work that you can do internally to prepare having children. I think that's a good idea, but like you said, there's just no way to actually prepare for everything that's going to come up within the context of having a child until you actually go through the process. And so it's sort of like you can do a little bit of both, right? Like don't completely ignore your inner work. Obviously, like be thoughtful when choosing to have children if possible, right? And be conscious in the way that you're going about all of that. But yeah, the inner work continues day after day after day, right, in the moments with our children. And so it's impossible to totally prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really not the point, and there shouldn't be any shame about when you actually start. And our children can be our biggest mirrors, actually. I know that for me, they were an amazing catalyst and amazing teachers in really basically showing me where I needed to work and really calling me out on my bullshit. Like I'm very lucky to have my eldest child, like a very strong-minded person that will always pull me up when I'm not being, in integrity, or when I'm telling her something but I'm doing something different, like that. It can be challenging, obviously, but it can also be a gift, right? Because we all have blind spots, and that's why inner work really goes, it's about like all the relationships and looking at our different patterns. But because you can't always see yourself and have that self-awareness, you can use these relationships and use how these people respond to you as a mirror of where your attention needs to go and where the inner work needs to go, where your focus needs to go.
Absolutely. I love that. I was smiling when you talked about your eldest, because my son is the same way. He's very strong-willed. He will absolutely call me out. And I actually I welcome it. I welcome truth. I welcome honesty in our relationship. And for me, it's, I want him to understand that having open communication with each other, having open, loving communication is absolutely essential. And we work at it too, because he is also sensitive and empathetic at the same time. And so sometimes he doesn't want to say certain things if he thinks it's going to hurt my feelings, but I always encourage him to do that anyway. But, it's so interesting because when I was pregnant with him, I had this vision in my mind of what this baby was going to be like. First of all, I thought it was a girl before I knew that it was a boy. And I had this intuition that this baby was going to be so sweet, so soft, right? So peaceful. And my son came out just like high energy, running all over the place, right? Just like very spirited, as they call these children, right? Like just would have total meltdowns. And so it was really kind of like the opposite of what I guess I thought I wanted. But obviously I love my son so much. And in just the way that you said, he is my greatest teacher, because I've grown so much in our relationship because I've had to just build like the resilience for myself to be around that kind of energy all the time. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. The expectation of what parenting would be like and what it is are just two different things. And so a big part of my inner work was actually readjusting my expectations and understanding what is appropriate child development as well, and what to expect from children at different ages. It's a big part of what I do on this channel as well, because there is the element of inner work and self-awareness and working on my triggers, but there was also the element of knowledge. Like I didn't understand, I wasn't a mom before, I was not around children as an adult, I wasn't trained, to understand children. So, diving into that knowledge and reading the books to understand, that there is a science, a developmental science to children. And once you understand that, you can really adjust your expectations, and it actually alleviates a lot of the triggers, right? Like to put it simply, once you understand that toddlers, they need to be given choices to avoid so many tantrums, and being given a bit more autonomy, and understanding that tantrums are completely normal, like that alleviates a lot of the frustrations as parents. So it was definitely a combination of knowledge and internal self-awareness inner work. But I know that you work a lot in regards to relationships, and I know that when I started doing my own inner work, it actually had a flow-on effect to all my relationships, not just parenting, but the relationship I had with my partner at the time, my mother-in-law, my parents, my friends. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that, because I know it's a huge part of your work.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I love that you noticed that because, yeah, it's like and it's funny because it sounds like, you were doing work specifically in the realms of parenting, right? And then you started noticing this wonderful byproduct of the work, right? And that it transferred to all of your other
Yeah.
relationships. And so for me, I actually, because I focus a lot on romantic relationships with people, they notice the same thing, right? They notice that then their relationship with their kids improves, with their family members. And for me, it's like, when you're doing this inner work, it usually takes you back to healing your own core wounds and your own wounds from childhood, right? Which basically is, we call it, that's the shadow work, turning towards your unconscious, turning towards the things that trigger you. And then once you kind of trace everything back and really focus on healing the original wounds, then that's going to completely change how you relate with everybody. So it's difficult to just isolate the positive effects to just your children or just your romantic partner. I work for example, I work with people a lot on developing healthy boundaries. And so this is something that people can practice with everybody. And so once you learn to do it, maybe let's just say in your romantic partnership, then you automatically start to kind of do it all over the place. And so, yeah, the effects are sort of like, I guess,
Yeah.
global in a way, you could say.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something that I've, observed around me, and is the fact that there is a lot of resistance to this inner work. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not easy, but also we love to distract ourselves, and I put myself in that as well. We love to distract ourselves to not do that work, right? And so what I'm realizing, and I know that you've seen it too, and that's why I wanted to have a chat, is that because of this lack of inner work, we are seeing a massive swing from authoritarian parenting, which is basically the way we've all been raised 30 years ago, to more permissive parenting. And, it's funny because there's so many labels nowadays, because, I don't know, there's this desire to reinvent the wheel and try to innovate, but so we talk about gentle parenting, respectful parenting, conscious parenting. There's just so many labels to say the same thing. Right. But in actual fact, I think it's like in the 60s, there was research that proved that the best parenting style and the best outcome for children is called authoritative parenting, which is being firm and loving, right? Prioritizing connection, but also having really firm boundaries and understanding your role as parent. But because of this lack of inner work that I'm observing, there's definitely this swing from authoritarian to permissive parenting. And I think there's an element of it being that you don't want to repeat the same mistakes, so that because you're afraid that your children are going to have to heal from you. So there is like a fear that comes with not being authoritarian, which makes you swing to the other way. And also, I guess, the fact that we're all so distracted and so busy, and I don't know what you think, right? But what I'm observing, that a lot of parents are checked out. So I was hoping you could discuss what you're observing and what you're feeling about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, yes, I completely agree with everything that you just said. And yeah, but like clearly the research has shown when I talk about authoritarian, permissive, right, on two opposite ends of the spectrum, and then authoritative being the healthy middle way. It just surprises me how few people actually know about this third way. In fact, authoritative often people mix it up with authoritarian. They think it's the same thing.
Yes,
there's a lot of confusion about that. They don't understand that this is the healthy middle way. They never learned it, which is mind-blowing for me, because I think I learned about this in a very entry-level psychology class on child development or something so I just assumed like most people should know about this, but that's not the case. And so I would say that I just made a podcast episode about codependency in parenting, and I encourage everybody, please just do your research on authoritative, healthy middle way parenting. And so, yes, I do believe that, our generation, I'm 45 now, and so a lot of us grew up with more authoritarian parenting, lots of spanking, there just was a lack of consideration for the child, and it was just way over here on the sort of dictatorship side of the spectrum. Now, some people listening might not think that that applies to them. It definitely is on a spectrum. So, just think about that. It doesn't have to exactly fit that. But yes, us growing up realizing like, oh my gosh, we actually have trauma, and just with the larger cultural shifts and everything, waking up to the fact that maybe this wasn't the best way to do parenting. And so without really thinking too much about it, I think people have swung to the other end of like, I'm never going to do it that way with my children, right? But then they don't really put a lot of thought into it. They just kind of go to the opposite end, thinking in their mind, okay, this logically must mean that I just do the exact opposite and just let my kids do whatever they want and not have limits and not, set boundaries and all this stuff. And that must equal good because the way that I grew up was bad. So people just don't understand that you can have a healthy mix of both. And authoritative parenting is what I definitely strive for. It's having boundaries with love, right? Being considerate to your child, explaining why you're actually creating certain rules and boundaries and limits, and clearly communicating and having compassion, but also really maintaining that, yes, I'm actually the one in charge. I love you, I care about you, and I'm the adult, and I get to make the final say.
Yeah. And so you were talking before about the fact that you're working with a lot of women who struggle with placing firm boundaries with anyone in their life. And so I guess, that would then have a flow-on effect to their parenting, right? Like if you're very weak with your boundaries, in friendships or with your parents or your partner, then it's going to be impossible for you to have strong boundaries with your kids as well. Like it's not who you are, right? It's not who you're being.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get to that in a sec. I just wanted to add one more piece that I remembered is that, the permissive parenting too, I believe it is really just kind of a result of actually people not doing their inner work, to tie into what you were saying, because they're not actually healing their own childhood trauma completely, because part of the healing of their own childhood trauma would be to understand about healthy boundaries, to learn about how to actually implement healthy boundaries with everybody in your life. So that is part of the healing, in addition to healing your levels of self-love and self-worth. So that, permissive parenting I also see is tied in and correlated to codependency styles, seeping into the parent-child relationship. Those two things are kind of correlated. But yeah, if a mother does not have healthy boundaries, which I would say 99% of the women who come to me, that's the thing that they have to learn in this lifetime, is they have to learn how to develop a spine. I mean, maybe you could say for women collectively, this is something that we have to learn, right? It's like women, I know this is stereotypical, but we don't have a problem, generally speaking, accessing our emotions, right? Our heart, our intuition. We're naturally pretty good at that. That's a generalization, but it's across the board true for most women. Our work is to actually learn how to develop a spine and to have healthy boundaries and set limits with people. And again, this goes beyond just children. It goes to our partners too. And so, yeah, if a woman in her romantic relationships, it especially shows up if she doesn't have good boundaries, it's not just going to magically, disappear when she has children. And so that will carry over. So this is why I often say I work with a lot of people who are empaths. I don't love labels, but it is what it is. They're very, very sensitive. They're intuitive. And these mothers tend to actually struggle sometimes with motherhood because they don't have very good boundaries generally. That's something they have to learn. And they're also very, very sensitive to their children's emotions, and they're very, very impacted by them. Yeah.
And I think it's also this misunderstanding of what love is, because sometimes the most loving things you can do is actually to place that boundary with your kids, right? I often joke with my children that I need to be firm because otherwise it would be a zoo around here, and they all laugh because they're all very strong-minded and they have strong personalities. They all laugh because they know it's true, right? Like they naturally push the boundaries, and they want you to stand firm in those boundaries because that's actually what makes them feel secure. Right? Talking
Absolutely.
about secure attachment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you misunderstand that it's not being loving, that's where the mindset needs to shift.
I think that's 100% like part of the problem. I think that especially for women, we have this association in our minds, many of us, that setting boundaries is mean, right? Like that's something that's mean, or people aren't going to
Mm,
like us. That's another thing, right? If we have any people pleasing
yeah,
tendencies of wanting people to like us, including our children, then we're going to have a hard time actually setting limits and boundaries with them. But I love what you say because, I
yeah,
really do. And I had to learn this because the woman that I'm speaking of, I was her years ago. So I had to learn that boundaries are
yeah.
actually the most loving thing, as you say, because you're helping, especially as a parent, you're helping to shape your child's character, right? This is part of our job as a
Hmm.
parent, right?
Yes.
We have to teach our children what are our values? How do we treat each other, right?
Hmm.
I see it hurts my heart when I see some of these children and how they speak to their parents in a very disrespectful way. If they're doing that to their parents at home, that's going to be happening out in the world too with how they treat other people. And so, having boundaries, not
Yeah,
just with things like bedtime and chores and things like that, but also how do we treat each other, and having boundaries around like
yeah.
how do we speak to each other. All of this is really imperative to help to shape the child's behavior and character in a positive way.
I love that you say that because actually shaping good character takes work. Like I think people, it's this whole debate around nature versus nurture, right? But yes, our kids have their own soul and their own personality and their own journey, but it's 100% our role and responsibility as parents, and I feel this in the core of my being, to make sure that they develop good character. And when you look around today, you can see that there's a rise of narcissism and a rise of all sorts of toxic behaviors. I know that a lot of teachers are complaining about the students and their behaviors at school, but also the parents and the lack of support that they get from parents when issues arise. And I mean, we can, obviously, school needs to be, improved, and there's a lot to talk about there. But really discussing good character and the fact that it takes work to develop, and it's your role as parents. And also, it's not just the role of parents. I would say it's a role of all adults to get involved with the kids in your lives, not just my own kids, but all the kids. Like there's also a trend that I'm noticing where adults are witnessing bad behavior from kids, but they actually stand back and say nothing. And there's a few times where I actually had to intervene, like seeing kids starting to be mean to each other at the school playground when I'm picking up my child. I'll intervene and say, guys, what's going on? Like, I'm not going to just stand back and do nothing. I remember when I was growing up, there was a lot more adults involved because you can't always be there, right? Like, it takes a village to raise a child. This is so true. And we've become more and more isolated, and we're taking more and more of the responsibility. But I can't always be there, and know everything that my kids are doing. And like I've shared before, my eldest, she's very strong-minded, and I know that she's the child that I need to really pay attention to. There are children maybe that, it doesn't really matter what you do, they will end up well. I know that with her, I need to do the work, right? And it's also knowing what each child needs, right? Attuning to each child and really understanding what they need from you. She definitely needs guidance from me and strong and firm boundaries, and placing those boundaries. If she's disrespectful with the teacher at school, and it's happened many times, really coming down on her, and like it's just unacceptable behavior, like completely unacceptable for me to hear that you've been disrespectful to the teachers in class. So yeah, if you have more to share.
Oh,
Sorry,
I mean,
I can talk and
yeah.
go on a rant for hours.
I love that you intervened in that situation. I would too, absolutely. And I see the same thing over here in Los Angeles. And I feel like, it is a little bit of the people pleasing. It's not wanting to step on toes, or maybe adults feel like, well, it's not my child, so what is my place to say something? But I absolutely agree with you that like this is something where I would definitely, and I have before with my son's friends, when they have acted up, and it's just, the way that I would parent my own child is the way that I also approach other children as well when they're in my
Yes.
vicinity, and like and I trust myself, right? Because I understand that if you put up with and you allow bad behavior, then you're enabling that behavior to continue. And so that's,
Yes.
it's a hard pill to swallow, but, we have to get over not being liked or whatever it is in that moment and do the right thing. So yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
I love that you said trusting ourselves because I want you to talk about another trend that I'm noticing, and this is what I like to call perfectionism parenting. And when I started reading all these parenting books and following a lot of parenting experts on social media, I started noticing this massive trend that started a few years ago of sharing scripts and specific scripts for specific situations. And there's a few channels on Instagram that blew up within 6 months. Like they went from zero to millions of followers.
Oh, wow.
And it's all about really focusing on scripting everything and observing that from a distance, like obviously I used scripts at the beginning. Like when I had a 4 and 2 year old, I was like, it was a nightmare. I was not doing well. I was in the throes of it. Two highly emotional girls, lots of tantrums. So scripts can be useful for things like, telling your toddler, you can choose between the red cup or the yellow cup. Like just little scripts that help you to tame when you have to deal with 30 tantrums a day, I'm all for. And I feel like it's also a stepping stone sometimes. But when the trend becomes like overblown and it creates this dependence on the expert and the script, and it means that you're not trusting yourself, and it means that when you are in the situation where you need to say something, you're going to be all up in your head and not following your intuition and actually tuning into the moment. Have you noticed this trend as well?
I haven't really because I'm so particular about what I choose to follow. And so like things like that,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound like something that calls to me. I don't like scripts at all, just for what you shared, right? I'm definitely more of an intuitive person. Even when I work with couples, very occasionally I will give them scripts to get through conflicts. However, I tell them, please do not rely on this. You can use it and look and see, what are the pieces and the parts, but I want you to actually use your intuition and feel into the other person in the moment, right? It's the same thing here. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you. Sometimes there's a time and a place. If you're overwhelmed, it can help you to, if you really don't have any idea, right? And you just need that support. But absolutely, I think especially as mothers, we need to be really trusting our intuition. I love what you said earlier about being tuned in to each child, and not just like the child themselves, but even every moment, every day is different with them, right? And so we need to be really
Yeah,
focused
exactly.
more
Like
on,
they might
yeah,
need, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah, they might need something from you today and something completely different tomorrow.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, I don't think I like the scripts. I mean, I think and then also, as you said, people can become dependent on them, which is probably why these accounts are blowing up, because it's something where it's like, oh, this is the right thing to do, and so is telling me, and they know better than I do. And then all of a sudden, actually, it backfires because it starts to erode your own self-esteem and self-trust as a parent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you lose that confidence, and
Oh, I think you could. Did you freeze?
then it's all external. Like
Hopefully, you can still hear me.
Oh, sorry, did I freeze? Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
So
good.
you lose that self-trust and confidence, and the whole point of inner work is actually to center yourself and to change from the inside. Little by little you shift how you feel, and little by little you actually become, if you're doing it right, you're supposed to actually become more grounded and more confident. And really, like, I feel like with the work that I've done over the last few years, I'm not going to say that parenting is easy, because I understand and I accept that it's never going to be easy, and there's going to be different challenges based on different ages. But I feel so much more confident in my ability to parent my kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel the same, and I think when I think about it, it is different. I mean, my son he's 14, he's turning 14. In the early days, it was like when I'm thinking about when you shared that it's overwhelming. There's tantrums all over the place. I get it. It really do whatever you need to do to get through the day. But like, I think what we're saying here is ultimately don't rely on these things and really hone your own sense of trust in yourself and your intuition, which is so important. And I'm also thinking about the reliance on scripts could also be a result of not having the community around you, right? Not having other women and other mothers and the grandmothers and all of the other people there supporting you and helping you, right? Because yeah, if you're mothering in isolation with nobody around you, you don't have any idea what you're doing.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that, because I also feel very strongly, and I'm a big proponent of inner work. It's changed my life. But at the same time, I know that inner work is only going to take us so far. And until we regain that sense of community, until we regain that village, we actually need like systemic societal change. It's not just about us doing inner work and it's all going to happen.
Yeah.
We need to make that change. So, like, I have so much compassion with, single moms who've escaped a domestic violent relationship and now they have to parent 3 toddlers on their own and, struggle financially. Like, I wouldn't tell them, like, do your inner work. Like, like we can also take it a bit too far as well in that sense. It's more like if you are able to, and if you are in a season of life where you're not on survival mode, absolutely do the inner work. And then it's our job to then try to give back to the community, right? Once you've healed yourself a bit and you feel like you have that more confidence and more energy, that's when you then offer services or, go out in the community. Like, I actually started volunteering for a women's shelter in my community. Like, there's just so many things that we can do once we're in a better place to actually give back, right? And that's the point of healing as well. It's not just to gain things afterward, it's actually to give back. I really feel that.
I absolutely feel that too. I mean, I think the reason why I went through, so much trauma in my own life is because I had to actually be of service. It was kind of honing me to have the embodied experience of going through really hard things so that I can actually assist people. So I totally agree with you. And so that's why, I try to put as much free content out there as I can. I have the podcast, I have Substack, I have a bunch of free things for people because like take what you can, right? Take what you can, do the best that you can. Yeah. I think that also, especially with Instagram and social media and all this stuff, it's like, some mothers can probably very easily fall into the trap of comparison and, looking at all the other moms who are doing it perfectly and all this stuff. It's not true. Like, look at behind the scenes and look at what's going on and just take some of the pressure off. I just say, like, my answer to almost everything is the healthy middle way. And so definitely don't be on the side of perfectionism. Don't also be on the other side of like doing absolutely nothing. Like, just try to do what you can and that's fine.
Yeah. And so I love that you share a lot about the spiritual side as well, and the fact that, it's when you really open yourself up more to spirituality that things shifted for you. And it's definitely been the case for me as well. So I was hoping you could share that and also share what you're seeing with the people you're working with.
Oh my gosh, this is a huge topic. Yeah, where do I even begin? I mean, I think for me, I have always been actually very spiritual. When I was younger, when I was very, very young, I was always a seeker. I was trying to teach myself. We actually didn't go to church. My mom told us that we were Christian, but we never went to church, so I didn't really know what that meant. So I tried to kind of get all of her like Bible study books and teach myself and all of that. And then I kind of weaved into different, like, studying Buddhism for a little bit, Taoism, all of like the earth spirituality. I was a seeker definitely until I met my ex-husband, which I met him when I was 18. And in college, because I was kind of influenced by him and some of my friends, I actually totally abandoned my spirituality and became atheist for a little bit, which was just crazy. But I mean, we all go through our own journey, right? And so when I was
raised atheist.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when my ex and I were together, he and I were together for almost 20 years. We were together a couple years in college, then we got back together. And so there was a huge area of my or years of my life where I just abandoned myself and I abandoned my spirituality. And so it was heartbreaking, right? It didn't like I was in the relationship, I lost myself, that whole story, you know. But when we decided to part ways, and even before that, when things started to go downhill, I had a sense intuitively, you know, that like we might not end up working out. And so that was actually when I started to kind of reclaim these lost parts of myself that I had abandoned. And spirituality was one of them. And so for me, spirituality is just it's this sense that, you know, we're not alone. We're here for some kind of a bigger reason, right? If you believe in a higher power, we're not just randomly like placed on this earth like by accident, like, oh, our parents had sex and now we're just here randomly. You know, it's like no, like we're here for a bigger mission and purpose. And so when I started to reclaim that, it was actually all of the like the pieces started to fit, if that makes sense for me. I realized, oh my gosh, okay, I see why I was gifted a son, right? Because like I'm here to heal my relationship with the masculine, starting from day one, my you know, abusive relationship with my father, all the father wounding, all of the wounding with the masculine. And now, because of my son, in addition to my inner work, I care so much about men and about like the health of men and boys and young men becoming good people, you know, and so that's huge for me. In addition to just like this higher understanding that okay, like if you believe in the idea of a soul, my soul came into this lifetime to learn lessons about relationships, lessons about romantic relationships, about parenting, about how to love myself. And so it all kind of started to make sense. And I could go in a million different directions, but now my spiritual practice and my intuition, it really leads the way, you know. And so as much as possible, I'm not perfect, but I do try to kind of put my smaller self, my ego to the side so that I can let whatever is bigger that's trying to work through me, that actually takes the lead in my life.
Yeah, and I feel like when I, when I opened myself up to spirituality, it actually removed the burden of perfectionism, because all of a sudden I didn't feel like I needed to like work everything out and know everything and that it was all on me. I also felt that, you know, like you said, there's a higher purpose. There's a what's the expression? You know, it can be chaotic, but, you know, it can also, oh, I'm so bad. Like I'm French, like I live in Sydney. I've been here for 20 years. Expressions in English are my downfall. I can never get them right. It's a joke. Everyone laughs about this because I can never get them right. But anyway, what I'm trying to say that there's, you know, it can be chaotic, but in the grand scheme of things, you can always extract lessons. Like I don't feel like with my spirituality, I'm not at the point where I can say everything happens for a reason. Where I am is that things happen and you can always choose to extract lessons from it.
Yeah.
Because I also feel that there is definitely external evil and there are things that should never happen. But ultimately, yeah, it frees you up from that perfectionist tendency that a lot of us tend to have. Because then, you know, you understand that your children have their own souls and their own journey as well. And whilst it's your responsibility to shape them into good characters, you don't have to approach it from a controlling perspective.
Yeah, I love that so much because yeah, it's really important to understand that, you know, and it gets confusing sometimes like with, okay, my soul came here to learn certain lessons, to grow and evolve. So did my sons, right? So did my daughters. And like, how do we actually come together and what's like our purpose together and the lessons and all of that. And it can be a lot, but I think it's like, if you can just tune into first and foremost, you know, your own intuition, this understanding of, I love like what you shared about, can I extract the lessons? That was like one of the number one keys for me when everything crumbled in my marriage and I was just going through such a devastating time. What really changed things for me was having a growth mindset. And this didn't just pop out of nowhere. My therapist at the time helped me to see that, you know, you have a choice. You can just either stay stuck in victim mentality of feeling sorry for yourself and how horrible all this was. And it's true. Like I was in that place, and it's not like she didn't have compassion or I shouldn't have compassion for myself for how hard that was. But it's like, yes, and what is here to learn from this? what is here to learn, right? And like I had to get really humble and admit that like I didn't really know how to do relationships, a romantic relationship well. Like we were doing all sorts of things like sweeping things under the rug. We, weren't having open, honest communication with each other. I was a people pleaser. I was putting him on a pedestal. All the things that I'm saying here, these are the lessons for me to learn. And so once I was able to realize that, I was like, okay, like I rolled up my sleeves. I'm like, okay, let's get to work, And so let
Yeah.
me actually,
Yeah.
this is like what I call like alchemizing a situation that's hard. It's like, how can you actually transmute it into something higher? Because if you don't, then what happens is that we often are cycling through the same things, right? Which are all opportunities for us to actually grow and evolve. But if we are missing the point, then we're just going to keep spinning and spinning and spinning.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned before that you've got a lot of compassion for men as well, and dads. And there's actually a lot of dads who comment on my videos. So they're all watching, the summaries, and they don't have time to read the books, and so they watching the summaries and they comment, which I love. Like I absolutely love that because we're all in this together. Like it's
Yeah.
I really don't like the divide that's happening as well with the different genders, and I have compassion for everyone. We're all trying our best. Like I think there's a lot of work to be done, but we are all trying our best, and we can all learn from each other. Like I've learned so much from you by following you for the last few months, and I know some people are learning from the summaries that I'm sharing, and it's just it's looking at life from the perspective of learning and evolving and growing, and looking at parenting that way as well makes it so much more fun.
Yeah, I mean, it really does because it takes like, I guess it's like, it takes some of the shame, like you mentioned earlier about the perfectionism thing. Like if you don't do it right, like then there's all this shame that comes up and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there's some things I'm not good at. Like it's okay, right? There's some things I'm kind of good
Yeah.
at. There's some things I'm really, really good at. It's like, okay, cool. Like there's so much room for me to grow here. And that's, to me, that's exciting. Like I like to actually like assess myself. Where am I at, right? Like where, like if I think about all of the different areas of my life, like what needs support, like what's actually doing pretty good. I think it's good to kind of just self-evaluate and just be humble, right? Just knowing nobody's perfect. And yeah, I love what you say about,
And actually talking, sorry, you go.
oh no, that's okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump on the fact that you were talking about, being humble and not perfect. And that's actually something that I'm modeling with my kids, because I don't know about you, but I grew up really putting my parents on a pedestal, like really thinking that they knew everything. And so falling down from that in my early 20s was quite difficult. So I really want my kids to understand that I make mistakes too. And actually I call myself out. Like I'm like, when they call me out, I will admit it, but also I do call myself out when I notice it. And I keep telling them, I'm growing and I'm trying my best, and this is what I do. Like I still raise my voice at my kids sometimes. Like I've got 3 kids who are very, very high energy, very strong-minded, and I think it's okay. Like I also want people to know that as long as you don't fall into the authoritarian territory where you're yelling like a crazy person and like there's no consistency, and it's like madness in your house, then you definitely need to like swing back. But having a bit of tension like actually will teach your kids how to navigate difficult relationships in their life as well. And sometimes I do need to be firm with my kids, like I said. When I was observing the best educators in preschool for my children, they were the ones who were, yes, loving and understanding and fair, but also really firm. Like their no meant no. So that's what I try to emulate.
Yeah, I love that, Anna, because I'm the same way. And, I think, and it also, like you said earlier, depends on the child, right? Not every child needs that. But when you have a child who has, who's very strong-willed, like some of us do, then yeah, absolutely, you need to be firm sometimes. And that is, and it's often,
Yeah.
it's so funny because it's often that, like for me, as someone who has needed to learn how to be firm and have boundaries, it's like I get paired with like a child that has a little bit more of a strong will, right? So I can practice this. And it's so funny how that works out.
Yeah.
But I love that because it's okay. It's not only is it okay, I would say it's actually that's what the situation is calling for. And I also love too, like there is always an opportunity for repair. I also sometimes lose my temper with my son as well. I'm not perfect. And so then, and on more than one occasion, I've had to go back and say, you know what, I'm sorry. Like I lost my temper a little bit and, here's why and all this stuff. And I just explain and like, and so, kids are he's so sweet. If I go to him like that with an open heart and just repair, like we will be through it in like 5 minutes. It'll be done and the air will be
Yeah.
clear. It'll be clear.
Yeah. And then also you're modeling what it looks like to repair,
Right.
so he can actually take that on and apply that in his life later on as well. So that's the whole thing, if you are, if you really strive for perfectionism, first of all, it's not possible and you're going to become burnout. And I think that's when people talk about mom rage. I really feel like mom rage is when you try to be perfect too much. But also, really modeling like what it looks like to be a person with flaws and who can be humble enough to realize like she went too far and to apologize, and then your kids will do that. Like I can see my children, they do that to each other now. They actually apologize to each other when they go too far. That's a whole modeling thing, and we are raising them in a less than perfect world as well. So we need
Right.
to arm them with the right tools to operate and navigate the challenges in their life.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And then also, okay, so there was one other thing that came to mind that I just wanted to share with people because like, so if you're someone who's listening and you want to really try this out, the thing that I've seen where it kind of goes too far is when the parents are always sort of collapsing, right? In terms of like, let's just say the child calls out the parent for doing something. And if the parent doesn't have a strong enough sense of themselves, right, and maybe they have like internal low self-esteem or they don't trust themselves, and then they just completely always are collapsing and collapsing, and they don't sort of run it through their own filter of like, okay, so like let me just like reflect on this for a moment. Like, is this something where I do need to take responsibility, or is this actually, the way that I behaved was justified? And so sometimes I do see that can happen sometimes. So that's not what we're suggesting. We're just
Yeah.
saying, as long as you're standing in your truth and you know yourself, right, from that place is what we're kind of talking about.
Yeah, and the more you practice that, the more it's going to become second nature actually to operate like that, where you're able to move through things quite quickly, thinking, okay, is that my trigger, or is that do I need to put a boundary? Like it becomes like second nature, and it's just like a flow of energy between you and your kids,
Right.
where
Yeah.
you don't need to really think about it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you asked me another question though. I forgot about it because I kind of went off on a tangent.
Well, I wanted to actually take it to, because we're talking about the different trends and spirituality, and one thing that also I'd like to discuss is I had a spiritual awakening in 2021, like a lot of people, and one thing that I've realized, not that I was completely naive before, but my rose-colored glasses on the world were ripped open, and one thing that was beneficial actually is to realize more realistically like the world we live in and how it relates to our parenting. So without understanding that you actually need to be a lot more intentional and conscious about how you parent your kids, so that you avoid being swept by those trends that we're talking about, whether it's permissive parenting, perfectionism parenting, but there's also another trend of the sexualization of our kids as well,
Right.
that I wanted to discuss with you. Like last year in school, my 8-year-old was invited for an evening talk where the parents could come and bring their child to talk about sex. And I knew for a fact that my 8-year-old was not ready for this talk. So it's, being able to also see that for what it is, see the trends and make a decision based on your own values and your own family values and what your own child needs. So I was hoping you could talk about that because I know that you can see that trend as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a hypersexualization that has overtaken, everything right now. And now it's not just sort of affecting adults, right? But it's seeping into the world of children, which makes me crazy. I mean, as a mother, this is something that is very concerning to me. With the ease of pornography these days, at the click of a button, it's so insane to me, the world that we live in right now. Like I remember my son coming home. He was in third or fourth grade, and one of the kids had a phone, which is like just wild to me. I don't know who gives their child a phone at that age, but someone had pulled up pornography like on the playground, and my son came home and he was totally traumatized by it and had no idea, and so like these are the things that are happening every day for kids, and they're just not ready for it. And so no, I don't think that like what were they thinking for 8-year-olds? Like this is not appropriate at all to be talking about this.
Yeah.
No. And like, so
like
what I'll say,
intellectually it's because they think knowledge is power, but knowledge when you're not developmentally ready is detrimental.
right. Absolutely. I mean, I would say that if they think that knowledge is power, then, they should go use their intellect and read some books on child development, because this is not appropriate to be teaching our children sexuality at that age, right? And so the whole trend of sex positive parenting, it sounds great. Like on the one hand, it's like, oh, okay, so we grew up in an era where there was like a lot of shame around sexuality. And so like sex positivity claims to like, we're just going to remove all the shame, right? And so that sounds good on the one hand, because nobody should be, that we do have to remove shame from sexuality. There's nothing wrong with it, but it also needs to be age appropriate, and we do need to protect our kids' innocence, right? As someone who had a childhood where there was sexual abuse involved, I can assure you that there are very, very damaging and traumatizing things that, it doesn't have to even be like that. It could just be the exposure to these things, which like in this day and age, you're getting it from all angles, and like all of the media, it's just soaked in sexuality right now. And so this is having a detrimental effect on adults and especially children, right? And there's so much confusion nowadays with gender and sexuality. And so like it's just a lot for kids to digest on top of everything else that, they're being thrown into these days. It's too much.
Yeah, and also like, what was like apparent to me as well is that when they organize that talk, it's this continuation of like externalizing the power instead of trusting the parents to know and do what's right for their kids. Like, why would the school organize something like this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's all about looking to the parenting experts, looking to the school. Like, no, it's your role to know and understand your kids and to have that discussion with them as they grow and as you feel that, they're starting to need it.
Absolutely. And I feel like, school has gone off the deep end when it comes to this. It's like they're taking over all of these different domains and trying to enforce some kind of agenda onto our kids that like, we're just asking for support with reading, writing, and math. Like, can you just, stay focused on what we need you to be teaching and not teaching all of these other sort of agendas? It's like, no, we don't need this.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, right? Because I guess the teachers would also complain. I know there's a lot of teachers who watch my channel as well. They would also complain that they can feel from parents that a lot of parents are putting so much more, what's the word that I'm trying to find? Like so much more expectations on the teachers. Like, when we started this video, I was talking about the fact that I feel like a lot of parents checked out. It feels like that as well, that it's okay, maybe it's also because the school feels like the parents are not doing their job because they are checked out and they're just so tired and we're doing so much and we're all doing it in silo and like with no community. And so maybe that's why they put on that that talk, but I feel like it's just not the right approach, and the onus should be put back on the parents. Like we cannot lose our responsibility for our kids.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like I think that, having worked in the public school system here in Los Angeles, especially in the inner city for years and years and years, like that was the rationale, right? Like, okay, well, we at the school, like now we bear the burden of not only teaching academics, but we need to teach them social emotional learning. We need to provide all of the mental health. We need to do all the sex education. Like basically every single thing was like on the school. And so, yeah, I do remember a lot of the teachers were kind of like, well, our job is basically to do everything all the time. And it's very overwhelming. I really have a lot of compassion for teachers. I used to watch the teachers and just be like, I have no idea how you're doing everything that you're doing
Oh,
day after
no
day.
way. No
Yeah,
way I could be a teacher.
no
Yeah.
way, no way I could be a
No,
teacher.
I'm
And
not
what I
patient enough for that.
and tying it back to what we said before about, the rise of narcissism and everything and the behavior problems and permissive parenting and how kids are just losing like respectful behavior. What I saw in the schools was that the teachers were spending 80% of the time with behavior management and only a little bit of
Yes.
learning was happening. It's like, oh my gosh, what is
Yeah.
going on at home with these, and so yes, I do think
Yeah.
that some of this needs to shift back to the parents.
Yeah. And actually, talking about behaviors, right, and building good character, and the fact that it's really important, and something we should really pay attention to and be a lot more intentional and conscious about. Um, I know that I think in one of your podcasts you were mentioning how you used to work with kids, problematic kids in school, I think, as a psychologist. And, because there is this trend of really assuming that everyone or every behavior has an unmet needs or an unmet feeling behind it. But I do feel like it's a lot more nuanced than this, because I can see it with my kids. Like I can see when they're acting out and they're tired. I can see when they're acting out and they are just so I don't know, angry or sad. I can also see that they literally sometimes just want to push my buttons for no reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are no reasons, and I know that you had an example about that where those kids were like pushing your boundaries. I don't know if you wanted to talk about this. Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
I love this because I had to actually learn the hard way from years and years and years, right, of practicing. And this was my early days of a psychologist and then I just wanted like everyone, all the kids to like me and all this stuff. And so I had this big heart. And so I was, sent the sort of top 1% of behavior problem kids. They were all boys. I love all of them so much, right? Great kids. And they were like master manipulators. And I say that with great love. Like these were kids who were like, on the streets of like South Central Los Angeles, and they're very smart in some ways in terms of being able to get what they want and navigate, right? And so like we were actually trained, I remember, to just assume that everybody has trauma, right? Everyone has major trauma, and so therefore you just have to do all this stuff to make it a safe space, and you have to basically coddle them, right? Which is like my word. They wouldn't have called it that. But what I realized is that you can't make these blanket statements. Okay. First of all, you can't just assume that everyone is majorly traumatized and then walk around on eggshells like that. You have to know the individual and work with them where they're at, right? And so, yeah, I think that sometimes behaviors, it is important to learn that sometimes acting up behaviors, there is an unmet need underneath. That's true. However, yeah, sometimes it's just because they're trying to manipulate the situation to get something they want. And so oftentimes I would, in my office was a safe space. We would listen to music, we would talk, I would have snacks there. And then all of a sudden they were asking to come into my office all the time, right? And so I was like, oh, this is great. But ultimately they were really just looking to get out of class and not do the work and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that was 100% of the time. There was certain times where it was helpful for they were actually upset about something. But this is just an example of taking off the rose-colored glasses and understanding that you can't always enable these behaviors too, because sometimes then it was more difficult to get them back into class and be doing what they needed to do. And so I had to swallow that hard pill of I'm actually enabling some of these behaviors to continue, right? And so that was something where I did have to learn about boundaries, and I did have to learn about, okay, we can take an approach where it's yes, I'm going to provide some support for you. and we're going to work on actually like getting you to do the things that you need to do at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, like that's the issue I feel with maybe social media, where we're sharing like snippets, very short form content, where you know it sounds like blanket statements, one size fits all. And I know that for me, like thinking that everyone is good inside and everyone has good intentions underneath, that they are simply wounded like I am because that's the way I operate, has kept me stuck in toxic relationships for so long. And removing those colored glasses and seeing the nuance and the context of everything has freed me so much in, you know, in the quality of my relationships, you know, the boundaries that I form. Like it's given me that inner power and that self-confidence that nothing else could have done, if that makes sense. So it's only when those rose-colored glasses, and those rose-colored glasses got removed by, you know, getting knowledge from people and, you know, studying narcissism and observing the behaviors around me. Like I've been able to observe really toxic people get caught doing really bad things and having zero guilt. So we are not all wired the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just want to speak to that for a minute because one of the books that was very eye-opening for me was called In Sheep's Clothing by Dr. George Simon. I had him on my podcast. We had such a good episode, a conversation, because, you know, he just speaks straight to the point. He's worked with narcissistic folks and he calls them character disordered individuals. Beyond just narcissism, you get into sociopaths and psychopaths. And so these people actually are real, right? Like we're living in a culture where all of this is actually on the rise. Permissive parenting and not actually checking bad behavior is part of the problem here. And so like I think people have to start to understand that, you know, I understand that sometimes these people are traumatized, and that doesn't make some of this behavior acceptable. It just doesn't, right? You have to to set limits on the boundary, right? I can have compassion for somebody, understand it's coming from trauma, and I can still place boundaries on their bad behavior. And I'm actually just going to use the phrase bad behavior, which I know is triggering for some people, but we're just speaking the truth of the situation, right? There's behavior that is actually very, very harmful that we should not allow, right? We should not allow it to happen. And so he was speaking in that episode and also in his book that the only treatment for narcissistic individuals is to actually teach them about character development, right? What does that actually look like to have a healthy, strong character? Teach them how to really go down that path of developing a strong, healthy character, and to be able to place limits and boundaries on their bad behavior. This is how you shape them into an individual that is less narcissistic and can move more towards center, right? If the empath is over here, the narcissist is over here, both of them kind of have to move to center, right? And so so he was saying how he couldn't get over the fact that in the world of therapy, he was seeing all of these well-meaning therapists show up and try to treat the narcissistic individuals with love and care and compassion. And this was actually the wrong approach, because none of these therapists were holding like limits and boundaries with the individuals. And so it was actually making them worse.
Yeah, I love that. I really want to read that book, actually, because I listened to the podcast episode and I loved it, and I resonated with so many things that he was saying. And this comes back to parenting, right? The fact that you need to call out the bad behavior. You know, you can't, like there's this trend, like when kids tell you I hate you, or like to say nothing, like you were talking before about the fact that you're noticing a lot of kids really speaking badly to their parents. Like when my kids don't speak nice to me, I will call them out and say, do not talk to your mom like that. Like I just don't understand like where we've gone wrong. Like just because I don't know, I feel like maybe it's the core of it, that it's coming from the fact that we think our parents did a bad job maybe, but you know, I grew up with physical abuse, you know, I had to recover from that, but there was also a lot of things that my parents did right, actually. And, you know, placing firm boundaries was something my mom was doing really well, and, you know, it's something that I don't want to throw everything, you know, I don't want to, the expression, I'm going to get it right, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
I got it right. Yeah, because there are still a lot of things that they did right, and we're coming back to this authoritative style of parenting that was deemed the best outcome, and I'm pretty sure it was in the 1960s, so it was actually a long time ago.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I love that too. And so like I've also
need to reinvent anything.
Right. We don't need to reinvent everything if people can just understand that. And so then also I see authoritative, the middle way parenting here, which is boundaries with love, right? You're doing the best of both worlds, right? This is how you create children who have secure attachment. There is a correlation between both of those things. And this is how you protect your children against codependency as well, because you're modeling for them actually secure attachment in a way. And so, yeah, I want people to really understand that you can have that middle way. And it's wild to me how people just aren't familiar with this third way.
Yeah, I know. And it's so true when you said like people didn't actually know about authoritative parenting. And I guess that's why they started, inventing all these words like gentle parenting and respectful parenting. And there's just so many of them, like I've lost track. So just one last thing that I want to touch on, because you spoke about secure attachment. I also feel like there's a misunderstanding about what secure attachment means, because, I don't know, we seem to always swing too far into perfectionism, but I feel like there's a trend of parenting as well that's taking that too far, and they actually think, like it evolved into this trend of attachment parenting, which is when you carrying your child all the time, you co-sleeping all the time. And I've got a friend, like she co-sleeps with 3 of her kids. Like there's no way I would be a good mom if I co-sleep with 3 children. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it like it is. And I know that like my first baby, she never wanted to be actually cuddled to sleep. She wanted her space. Yeah. My second baby, I didn't have a choice. I had to co-sleep because she was born not sleeping and didn't sleep for 2 years. So, you adjust, obviously. But we also need to, I feel like secure attachment to me, and obviously you're going to tell me what you think, but the core of it is that you actually need to really enjoy your children, and they need to feel that. And if I'm doing things that don't make me enjoy my children, like if it's a zoo around here because I don't have enough firm boundaries, if I'm co-sleeping and I'm not sleeping and sleep deprived, like there's no way I'm going to enjoy my kids. And so like, I don't know how that secure attachment will actually happen. I don't know if you, like what you have to say about that.
Oh, I love that you are bringing this up, because I've also noticed too. I mean, my son is 14 now, but when he was a baby, and I'm sure parents are still doing it, the attachment parenting, right? And so it's like, I think that I never really got into it, honestly, so it didn't work for us. Like Hayden would have never co-slept with me. I mean, he just was all over the place all the time, like crawling and stuff. So that would have never worked for us. And so if it works for some people, that's great. But I do agree that I see it actually slipping more into permissive parenting. That's what I see. I see the way that some people are actually implementing it is that I've seen really disastrous outcomes actually with some of the children. I'm not saying this happens across the board, but there was a lot of clinginess, always needing to be around, right? Like over dependence on the parents. And so like secure attachment for me is like, it's the understanding that, and this apply, like I'll talk about it in terms of childhood first, but it's the understanding, that your parent loves you, right? Like there is free flowing love and affection and connection, right? But there's also this understanding that we are 2 separate individuals, right? And so that my role is to actually shape you into a person who is independent, who can slowly but surely, stand on your own 2 feet. And not have to be needy and clingy all the time with me. So that's what secure attachment is. And so when I apply this to couples, because a lot of times couples come to me or individuals wanting to move into secure attachment, because that is the foundation for healthy relationships across the board. It's a combination of being really, really close, right? And understanding how to be intimate and connected, but then also being able to separate out into your own energy. And so it's both. And so that's what secure attachment is all about. And so, I think that people just need to watch that attachment parenting doesn't bleed over into to permissive parenting.
Yeah. And I guess, with anything that we're doing, we should really ask ourselves, are we doing it out of fear or out of love? Because I do think that a lot of things, like, this permissive parenting or this overly attached parenting can come from a place of fear, of this fear of messing up our kids, and thinking that the attachment is really fragile. It's a lot more fragile than it actually is.
Right. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, like I said earlier, and like you said, like if it works for you and your family, and that's just what feels natural, it feels really good, truly, like authentically it does, that's great. But I do see some
Yeah.
people are kind of forcing it, and it doesn't make anybody happy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, that was such a good chat. Thank you so much, Leigh-Anne, for coming on. I could talk to you for hours. I love everything that you have to share. And can you tell the audience where they can find you?
Oh my gosh, Anna, it was so fun to be on. Yeah, I'm definitely like open to talking anytime. This was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you. So people can find me on
Great.
Instagram. I'm Love Evolved. I am sure you'll share all the links. I also, my website is
Yes, I will.
love-evolve.us. And so you can go on there and you can find out more about my work. And I have my own podcast and I write on Substack. And so there's lots of different ways people can connect with me. But, I'll just share with anyone who need support with relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or even with parent-child relationships, you can always book a free 30-minute call with me. I work with people all over the world as a relationship coach. I'm also a therapist and a breathwork teacher. So thank you again so
Yeah,
much.
great. And that's okay. And just to add to that, you definitely have an amazing podcast that I listen to regularly. You posted, I think, yesterday, there's an episode specifically on parenting. And I think you also had an amazing video on codependency that people can find on your website. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, it's on my website too. And if people can't find it, you can just message
Yeah,
me. I'll
cool.
send it to you.
Great. And I'll share all the links in the description of this video as well. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so
Thanks,
much.
Leigh-Anne.
Thank